Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely moving story from our source material called The Guest in the Rain. It's one of those tales that just perfectly captures the forces of hardship, radical kindness, and ultimately, justice. It's basically a masterclass in how our absolute darkest moments can suddenly become the catalysts for our greatest blessings. Let's get right into it.
So, think about this for a second. Can a single act of kindness during a terrible storm really change an outcast's destiny forever? I know, it sounds a bit like a fairy tale, right? But the text we're looking at today grounds this exact question in some incredibly gritty reality. We're going to see exactly how one man, facing absolute destitution, makes a split-second decision that completely alters the course of his life.
To really grasp the stakes here, we first have to look at the grim reality facing our protagonist. His name is Diru, a laborer who lives with his wife, Kajari. And the narrative doesn't open on a sunny, optimistic note. Nope. It starts with relentless, punishing rain. It's literally been pouring for a week. They can't go out to work, their modest roof is leaking everywhere, and this is the truly heartbreaking part, the rainwater actually seeps in and destroys their hard-earned paper savings. The physical cash they had painstakingly scraped together, just ruined. They're at rock bottom.
Okay, let's unpack Diru's situation a bit more, because his poverty isn't just financial. It's deeply social. The source text describes him as anaf. Now, while that translates to orphan, the context goes much deeper. It means existing completely without a societal safety net. In his village, this total lack of family makes him an absolute outcast. Aside from his wife, he is entirely alone in the world.
And this isolation just breeds incredible cruelty. His own neighbors constantly mock him. They literally tell him, "You are a jinx. You have no relatives, no family." So when Diru braves the terrible storm to go work for the wealthy local landlord, Takor Dorjin Pratap, he's carrying this heavy burden of being blamed for his own tragic isolation.
But this sets up a really brilliant contrast in the text. On one side, you've got the villagers, cruel, mocking, discriminatory. But then on the other side, you have Diru. Despite facing this daily abuse, he remains remarkably kind. He's sharing, he's unconditionally welcoming. And this stark difference in character is exactly what sets the stage for the inciting incident of our story, which happens right as Diru is trudging home in a torrential downpour.
On his way home, Diru spots two strangers, Raman and Janki, huddled desperately under a tree, just soaked to the bone. Now, instead of looking the other way, Diru takes three incredible steps. First, he approaches them. Second, he offers them shelter in his own leaking home, despite literally having nothing himself. And third, he treats them with absolute honor, welcoming them as if they were cherished friends.
This actually perfectly illustrates a core cultural concept from the text, the mehman, or guest. Traditionally, a guest was viewed as a literal manifestation of the divine. Driven by this deep-seated belief, Diru's wife Kajari joyfully cooks up her absolute best food for these complete strangers. It really showcases the pure, uncorrupted nature of their hearts.
And what happens next is just beautiful. Stranded together by this endless rain, a rapid, powerful friendship forms between the two couples. They spend their time having these deep, meaningful conversations late into the night. They share all their meals together, and when Diru eventually has to go back to work at the warehouse, Raman actually tags along to help him with the heavy labor. They effectively build this chosen family, creating a warm, loving sanctuary, while that freezing storm just rages outside.
But just as things are looking up for Diru's spirits, we hit a massive crisis. Both Raman and Diru fall ill from being constantly out in that freezing rain. So Diru is at work, he's exhausted, feverish, and he has a momentary lapse of physical strength. He slips, and he accidentally drops one of Takur's heavy sacks of grain directly into the water, completely ruining the harvest inside.
Diru is absolutely terrified. He begs Takor for forgiveness, practically pleading to slowly pay back the cost from his meager wages. But Takor's response is just devastating. He says, "No, you must repay 3 sacks for every 1 sack." It is a decree born of pure, unadulterated cruelty and greed. Takor basically just sees an opportunity to crush a vulnerable man.
Now, really think about this multiplier for a second. 3 times the debt. For a poor laborer who is already living hand-to-mouth, and remember, whose tiny savings were just completely washed away, a 3x penalty isn't just a fine. It's basically a life sentence. It's an impossible, crushing burden shoved onto someone who has absolutely zero safety net.
So the obvious question is, how could a poor, isolated orphan ever repay this impossible debt? Well, he can't. The source describes this truly heartbreaking scene where Diru and Kajari go to bed hungry, completely overwhelmed by despair. They genuinely believe a dark cloud has permanently ruined whatever was left of their lives.
But here is where the narrative completely shifts gears. While Diru and Kajari are sleeping in despair, we find out a massive secret about our guests, Raman and Janki. They are not poor, wandering travelers at all. No, they're actually incredibly wealthy city merchants. As they confess to each other in private, they are rich in wealth and businesses, but they are incredibly poor in family and real relationships. They intentionally hid their wealthy status because they craved genuine human connection, not the fake sycophants who usually surrounded them just for a handout.
Recognizing the unselfish, pure kindness of Diru and Kajari, Raman and Janki take action. The very next morning, they reveal their immense wealth and simply hand Diru the cash to wipe his debt clean. Armed with this financial backing, Diru marches straight up to Thakur, throws the cash down, and walks away from that abusive employment forever. What a moment, right?
The emotional high of that triumph transitions into this bittersweet farewell sequence. Raman offers Diru a lucrative business partnership, saying he needs someone truly trustworthy by his side in the city. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Kajari gifts Diru a brand new shirt. But as Diru begins to change his clothes, the entire story turns completely on its head.
As Diru takes off his old shirt, Raman suddenly freezes. He sees a distinct birthmark on Diru's neck. And it's not just any mark. It is an exact, matching copy of a mark on his own neck, a mark his mother always told him belonged to his long-lost brother, who vanished when they were just little kids.
The sheer speed of this realization is breathtaking. Just think about the timeline of these events. Day 1, the impossible debt is miraculously paid off by a stranger. Day 2, a matching birthmark is spotted. Day 3, the brothers are officially, joyfully reunited. The mocked Anof, the man who thought he was entirely alone in the universe, finally realizes he has family. It absolutely gives you goosebumps.
The transformation is absolute, and honestly, incredibly satisfying. Diru goes from being a mocked, impoverished outcast living in a leaky hut to a wealthy, highly respected merchant in the city, working side by side with his brother. And the ultimate irony the source material leaves us with? Because of his incredible character in this sudden partnership, Diru ends up wealthier and far more respected than that cruel landlord Thakur ever was.
We've reached the end of our explainer today, and I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Is karma simply the family we choose to build through unconditional kindness? Remember, Diru didn't know he was saving his own brother. He just chose to save a stranger in the rain when he had absolutely nothing left to give. It really makes you wonder how our own everyday acts of compassion might be quietly shaping our ultimate destiny. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this beautiful story, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.